I'm owed a public apology. If you're going to publicly scrutinize me, Dana White, you publicly need to apologize to me. I've done nothing but good stuff for the sport. I've done nothing but be a good model for the fucking organization. I go out there, I fight with integrity. I covered your sport from the Fox desk a week before my fight. I always uphold my responsibilities with the organization. It's time out for that. The word behind business is man. You need to be a man. You owe me a public apology.
I love it. I love how we Tarantino'd this here. This is a spicy opener. Fucking, you have a champion that pissed off. The question is, how do we get from here to there? How do you get to a point where you have a champion that angry, just publicly calling out someone like Dana White? I like this.
This is going to be a fun one.
It is.
Welcome to an all-new episode of MMA Untold, where we take you inside the lives and careers of fighters, key rivalries, and historic events that make mixed martial arts the greatest sport on earth. My name is Taylor Gabriels. Joining me as always is the scrappy one, Zach Gratton, and the one you heard from just a moment ago, the Godfather, Tim Thomas. You ready for this episode?
I am. It's a good one. He's a polarizing guy, even within this podcast.
I definitely, and we've gone back and forth, and I think I've turned a new leaf on this guy. I'm genuinely excited about it because I didn't like Woodley for the longest time, and this past couple of months or last month or so, I've realized, you know what? I actually kind of do like this guy, and I'm really excited for this episode.
It really hit me at one of the last press conferences they did. I actually texted you guys after it happened, and I'm like, oh my God, I really miss Woodley. Like, I actually really miss him. And I was like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, that's crazy.
We seem to have a history of that on this podcast where we feel one way about a fighter, we learn more about them, and we come around on them. We'll see if you guys do too. Maybe you already like the guy. Maybe you don't know anything about the guy, but you certainly will after this episode. So today we are profiling the life and career of the current welterweight champion, Tyron Woodley. And be sure to stick around for the end of the episode where we're going to dive a bit deeper into the untold aspects of Woodley's story and discuss some of our takeaways from the episode. So this is the story of the chosen one, Tyron Woodley.
I want to ask you a question before you start that. Why is that a bad thing? Why do people, if you change your mind on something or something, why is new information changing your opinion on someone or something a bad thing? Because people will say you weren't on the bandwagon. Fuck you. Why is that bad?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't want to attack the fans of this sport because I think it happens across the board. But I don't know if people are just generally open-minded enough to let their opinion be swayed one way or another. I hope that our fans, the listeners of this podcast, fall in line with that. I hope that they are open-minded and maybe you do come in one way feeling very strongly against somebody. Then you hear their story, and that is kind of the goal of this podcast is once you hear it, then no matter what way you feel, at least you have the facts and the foundation to back it up, and you're not just forming your opinion based on hearsay or based on a media clip, a soundbite, something like that. You're going to get the full story of this guy and then make whatever judgment you want.
And we've seen at this podcast alone, we've seen with ourselves and fans do that. So they won't like somebody based on something. We'll tell them, hey, give this a listen. And then they just still like kind of just brush it off like, oh, no, none of that's true or like this and that. Like you got to have an open mind here. Like this is a sport that changes in an instant. It goes from not being anything anybody's watching to now that a big name is coming back, it's all anyone's talking about. Sure. So this sport changes so much, you need to be able to change with it.
I think that there's so many people, and this is going to date the podcast a little bit, that are going into this Till fight, and they're thinking, God, for the sake of the UFC, Till really needs to win. But I think we can tell you here over the next hour that, like, hey, that may not be the case. Woodley could be the guy for them, too. And maybe the UFC just doesn't know how to get us there and what to do to promote him. So, anyways, proceed.
So we're going to do that for the UFC.
No.
Like we always do.
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. Tyron Woodley is the former NCAA Division I All-American wrestler, a Strikeforce title contender, and current UFC welterweight champion with 3 successful title defenses and a record of 18-3-1. And that's just the beginning of Woodley's achievements. From being the only fighter to attend a Super Bowl with UFC president Dana White, to being invited by Dana White to a private concert with Kendrick Lamar, Tyron Woodley has more than made a name for himself in this sport. But despite all of this, and being a stalwart analyst for Fox, a philanthropist, an actor, husband, father, Tyron himself is not satisfied. And as you heard in our opening clip, much of Woodley's dissatisfaction stems from his belief that he's been treated differently.
I absolutely think that's the case. I mean, look at the accomplishments you just ran through, things that were left off there. Doesn't he have that segment on TMZ, which is actually a really big deal?
Yes.
TMZ is a really big deal. Podcast, has his YouTube channel, or his YouTube show. We'll get into the work that he does with the youth. I mean, this guy, Uriah Faber, people go out and say that guy's like a huge businessman and an entrepreneur. Well, like Tyron Woodley is doing well for himself too. Yep. And this is a guy who, as we'll show, very smart, understands the window of a fighter, and it's pretty cool to see what he's doing to promote himself since his promoter isn't doing that for him.
And that's crazy. You said that, they were at the Super Bowl together, and you said at the Super Bowl, you're having a good time with your boss, right? Your team versus his team. Now they have like this beef together. They're not going to a Super Bowl anytime soon together again. Like, just the way it seems. And I don't think it's because of the beef. I think it's because the Falcons aren't going to make it anytime soon.
How dare you?
So,
I'm walking out.
But no, it's crazy how you go. And it was like a 6-month difference, I feel. Like, not even. It happened over a summer.
This is going to be
they were close. And then all of a sudden, the second fight with Wonder Boy happened. And now he's off the train.
Well, if you've been following UFC for any amount of time, you know this is Dana White's thing. He does this all the time. He'll be the biggest supporter of a fighter, and then he's down on the fighter. He leads with his emotions, and specifically with Woodley and Dana White, they have gone back and forth, and they run from one extreme to the other. I mean, again, being the only fighter to be invited to a Super Bowl, and there's video of them at Dana White's kid's birthday party, Kendrick Lamar, they're jamming out, they're taking videos together, and then the next minute Dana White's insulting Tyron publicly, and it's back and forth. They make up, they're like terrible girlfriend boyfriend, that they don't belong together. They're gonna break up and get back together forever.
Constantly.
Yes.
Yeah. This episode's going to be a bit of an indictment on Dana as a promoter. Honestly, it's one of the major themes, but
the contrast really stands out, as you'll see, and as Tim you alluded to. Tyron's biggest problem with Dana White and with the UFC is a lack of promotion, and as you said, Tim, one of his biggest things, Woodley, is that he self-promotes like nobody else. I mean, there are some people, Connor, other people, but his Champ Camp, his videos, podcasts, all that stuff you name, that's all him. There's no backing from anyone. He is going out of his way to promote himself, going on radio programs, everything.
And he legit talks shit too. Like, I mean, you guys, you heard that clip in the beginning. Any interview with him, he trashes other fighters. He talks shit about him. He's just run Kobe Covington into the ground legitimately, saying he's just not a real threat. He trashes contenders. I mean, he's talked shit about like Damian Maia now, saying he's like over the hill, this and that. He actually talks real shit. None of it's fake. I mean, I'm not sure what else he can do, even if, because I'm putting all that promotion aside, all those the videos and the podcast. He actually talks shit too. He does everything.
You know what's crazy? He's kind of confusing now that I'm thinking about it, because he does like talk shit and it's real. He's got the perfect story to be a great heel, but he's also like a good guy. He's never like, I don't want to, for lack of a better term, talking out his ass. He's never like, he's always has something either good to say or bad to say, but he's true to it no matter what. Like he doesn't just say it just to say it.
Well, to your point, I think that's the disconnect that we can help bridge for people through this episode is I think that on the surface, when you look at like a comic book character, trash talking what looks like a villain, but the disconnect is once you hear his story and understand his background, you realize he's like a great fucking guy. He's articulate. He's a businessman. He's helping out the youth. And maybe that's why there's this disconnect, and maybe we can help people understand that you should actually be cheering for him and not booing him.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will get to that. And we should talk a little bit about that chip that's on Tyron's shoulder, or that is how people have described Tyron Woodley, as having a chip on his shoulder. And it's really nothing new for Woodley, because Woodley has had to defy odds and demand respect from a very young age. Growing up in Ferguson, Missouri, the 11th of 13 children.
Okay, just stop right now. Okay,
Does cheap brother doesn't?
I know this comes up every fucking time about these parents, but I cannot believe it. I have one daughter, okay, and I can hardly survive. 13?
13, man.
13.
How? How does it even work day to day? How do you feed 13 kids? The diapers? I don't even understand. I think you would just be continuously changing
You must
diapers.
go cloth diapers at that point, because you start washing stuff. There's no way you're buying that many diapers.
A minute ago, I brought up comic book heroes. That mother is a legitimate comic book superhero. I have no idea how she did it.
She is a superhero, and Woodley says it over and over. And you will see through this episode that Tyron Woodley's mother is not just everything to him, but much of the reason that he got the leg up that he needed, because he could have easily been lost in his surroundings, not just in the home, but outside of the home. You've got gunshots and the cries of drug addicts ringing up and down Tyron Street. And a bit further up the block, Windhurst Apartments stood, a building known for its gang violence and drug activity, and a building Tyron was forced to walk past each day on his way to school. And all the while, the choice of whether to embrace these surroundings or reject them hovered over his head like a dark cloud.
That's something you need to choose from. To choose that at such a young age, that's crazy, because at such a young age, you want to fit in. That's what you want to do. In your environment, what do you do? Do you go with what nobody's doing and just kind of stay away from it and mind your business? Or do you continue down that path and just be cool with everybody and not have to worry about getting robbed or getting beat up or anything like that? That's a tough choice for
that's
a young
the crazy
boy.
thing. For someone like you or I, when we're in school and there's peer pressure, if you go against that, then the worst thing that happens is you don't fit in. Maybe you get made fun of. Mm-hmm. Maybe you get quote unquote bullied.
Yeah.
Like you said, if he goes against that, he gets bullied, but in a far more dramatic, drastic, extreme way. I mean, you don't go, if you're not with him, you're against him kind of thing. And he talks about that in some of the, short documentaries we watch. It was kill or be killed. It was join in or be on the receiving end of that stuff.
Get picked on or do the picking on. It's from that neighborhood, from one gang to the next. Within a mile, I think he says there's 3 different gangs that he has to walk by, and it used to be all in just this condensed area. And he says that he's glad that they cleaned it up, because it was a path for many kids that wasn't a good one.
And he almost went down it.
Exactly.
I mean, he did join in with them. He admits that. He did join in that for a short time, but at home, he's got this solid anchor. Mm-hmm. He's got his mother as an anchor, and that really is going to help lead him away from that and lead him down the right path.
Just really puts things into perspective, what everybody goes through. And I know obviously bullying is a huge, huge problem, but when you hear what kids like him went through with that whole thing about getting off the bus and there's just, there'll be gangs there to bully you. That's scary shit, man. That's an entirely different level. You don't think about,
Man, not only the gangs too, but then you brought up the drugs. Imagine getting off a bus or walking by, and at the end of the street, there's a drug addict that is, high on something, and they approach you. As a kid, how do you feel? Normally, I get it. The gang it's probably a worse scenario, but that's still kind of creepy, having some grown person come to you and ask you for something like that. You're like, how am I supposed to know what an 8-ball is? How am I supposed to know what how?
Well, you grow up real fast.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Exactly.
Tyron Woodley grew up really fast. And not just with what was going on outside the home, but inside, things, were different, but not much different. At 10 years old, in fact, on Tyron Woodley's 10th birthday, his parents split and his father left the home. And despite Deborah Woodley, Tyron's mother, like we said, being such an anchor and doing all that she could to steer the family in the right direction, she soon found that she was unable to make the payments on their home and lost the house to the bank. Tyrone, his mother, and 2 younger sisters moved in with a friend down the street, but Tyrone would periodically sneak back into his old home for its familiarity and for the occasional cold shower.
That's heartbreaking. And especially, did you kind of go over earlier, and pardon me if I missed this, but like how hard, like the 3 jobs she had, the triple shifts. She was working at multiple hotels, working with Mary Kay. She was doing everything she could. And that, again, was somebody, my mom, I grew up with my mom working 2 jobs, which would literally be day and night every day. And that's like heartbreaking to think that for her, like she tried so hard, and on the surface it didn't work at first, but then in the end, obviously we know he's able to take care of her. What an awesome, as we get there, it's cool that in the end it really did work. But it's amazing. I
mean, the 3 of us, full disclosure, and you can find this out through older episodes, but the 3 of us grew up with mothers working 2 jobs, 3 jobs to take care of us. So the 3 of us know at least what that side of things is like. And again, man, having 13 kids, working 3 jobs, being separated from your home, part of you live in one place, your other, kids living a different place. Tyron's got to walk past his old house.
Imagine, we think about how embarrassed we get when we're younger. Yeah, so he moves in across the street and lives with like a friend, right? Him and 2 of his sisters, I believe.
Yep, his 2 younger sisters.
And every day they have to have, that's just, you would feel shame, It's no fault to them, but yeah, that's your old house, man. That's so hard.
And what's even harder is Woodley was used to it the other way around because his mother, Deborah, would take in other families in the neighborhood. And what's crazy about that, so she had a rough childhood, which we won't go into that, but she had a rough early life, and then she turns her life around, and then she starts taking in people who are displaced from their homes, but also taking in gangbangers, drug dealers, drug addicts.
It was like no questions asked, right?
No questions asked. Anyone was welcome. And Woodley admired that about her because she didn't turn away the people that would normally be turned away.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's amazing,
well,
which I think I'm sure helped them have a place to stay when it was their turn.
Yeah.
And I think having that mindset too, she's not only is that like, they normally would get turned away, but you think about like if she had turned them away, what would have happened? They could have ended up somewhere like in a ditch, or something could have happened to her family if she says no. Like I don't think there was any pressure there for her to say yes, but for her to, I think she like acknowledged that like I'm gonna make a better place for this person. It only creates a positive mentality, and that's why I think Woodley is so. He's positive about what he can do and what he can accomplish because he has seen his mom go through numerous things and get through it. So I don't think anything's really going to stop him.
Yeah, that's one thing Woodley does not lack is confidence.
No.
And we understand why. So with his mother working 3 jobs to provide for the family, Woodley knew nothing would be given to him in life for free. And this includes his education and life after high school. But with money a scarce resource, Woodley figured his best chance at college was through athletics. And in a Sports Illustrated article, Woodley recounts the decision to pursue sports as a means for higher education. And he says, quote, "I knew I wouldn't be able to afford college because there wasn't that much money coming in. I figured if I could control what I did academically, and if I could push as hard as I can athletically, then I would put myself in position to be successful."
Wow. I just want to say really quickly, before you go into his collegiate career, you missed out on 2 important notes. First of all, I don't think you talked about why he got into wrestling, did you? Here's my obligatory pro wrestling story.
Please tell that story, because I love that
he
story.
Got recruited. He's like, you want to come wrestle? And he's like, hell yeah, I want to wrestle, thinking it was pro wrestling. Gets there, and he's like, where the hell's the ring and the ropes? And then he gave it a go. And he said all he had at that point was like the football tackle.
Yep.
And he was still just massacring everybody. And then I loved his story where he said, like, I think it was like the first meet or whatever, one of the first, he picks the guy up and the guy like bites his tongue down on his tongue and like it like cuts part of it off.
And he said that was awesome.
And like nobody wanted to wrestle him after that. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
And he said he loved that.
Athlete. Yeah, he loved it. He loved it. Damn. And that's with like no background. And then I don't think we talked about it, but he ends up going like was that high school, right? 48-0?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, since we like to talk about records on here sometimes, 48-0, and then he like never gave up a single point.
That's
except
crazy.
For when they got back up or whatever.
Except for when they got up. Yep.
Okay.
So
It's pretty good.
you know, and he says that it was tough. Like wrestling was one of those things. It was tough, like in his district, because it's one of those sports that is easy to just cut because they don't want to fund it. So like everybody wants to be. He says everyone wants to be like LeBron James and stuff, and so they would keep those sports. But being on that wrestling team, you had to bust your ass not only to afford the new singlets, the jerseys, I guess you call them, but to just fund the wrestling program. Like, it's hard for that. So he's still fighting, literally, still fighting to do anything that he wants to do. And during his high school, when he was in 7th grade, before he went to high school, he was told that, I guess, that his high school hadn't won in, 40 years, I think?
Won a state championship. Yep.
And he was told by a senior leader that there's no way that he would win one. Not a chance. 48-0 and wins one. So, I mean, he's stacked up against the odds. I mean, look at the numbers are against him, literally, with funding the program and not having a championship at that school. All the odds are against him as far as family displacement, gangs around him, and he's still finding a way to be who he is. And
even to the point where you're talking about the singlet, that was embarrassing for him to wear,
A lot of them didn't Dean Thomas say like he dropped out of wrestling because he didn't want to wear the singlet or whatever?
Exactly. So, I mean, coming from that background, you don't want to wear that thing.
Yeah, right. It's just,
I wouldn't want to wear that thing.
I mean, being Woodley's size, I mean, they say from being a baby, he had too much muscle, so I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, to anybody who makes any PED accusations to him, literally his mother was getting like reprimanded by the doctor because they said he was too muscular as a child. And she's like, look, I'm breastfeeding him. What the hell am I supposed to do?
What do you want me to do? I'm breastfeeding him and giving him milk.
Yeah.
And then she says the next thing I do is give him a can of beer and tell him to get a job. Like he's a baby. Perfect.
All right. Well, although Woodley had successfully graduated high school and then from college with a degree in agricultural economics, like many others fresh out of school, Woodley was unsure exactly what came next. But one thing was for sure, Woodley wasn't ever looking back. He decided to continue his education at a graduate level while coaching at Southern Illinois Edwardsville. Earning $30,000 a year and furthering his education wasn't a bad life by any means, but fate had bigger things in mind for Woodley. After a shoulder injury that would require surgery and destroy any hopes of competing at an international level, Woodley was offered a proposition by ATT American Top Team trainer Wade Rome. Come work at ATT, and in turn, you'll receive health insurance and be able to afford the surgery. And Woodley takes him up on this.
That's a hell of a way. I love how the twists and turns of life, like this is how he ends up at ATT. It's like the whole, like, I need shoulder surgery and they offer it if I'm there for a while. Which, wait, I don't even know if he's allowed to do that. If you could say, like, is it pre-existing injury? How the hell does that work? But that's between, hey, what the hell? Nice work, Wade Rome. But no, that's super fascinating, and I do feel like we quickly skipped over some of his like college accolades, and even the reason why he ended up at Missouri, like the Zach. I don't know if you read the Nebraska thing.
Yeah, so he got a scholarship that was going to pay like 75% of his schooling, right?
And Nebraska,
and then the coach he was forced to resign because of accusations of
I think giving kids money when their scholarships ran out. Yikes!
So he gets his scholarship pulled. That was going to pay 75%
at Nebraska,
which is a huge wrestling school, and then ends up having to. I don't necessarily have to say settle, but he does.
But they were down in the dumps wrestling wise.
Yeah,
Mizzou was down in the dumps,
and he settles for Missouri. That man,
and he changes the entire program, the whole culture.
Yep.
It's actually I want to say I don't know if you guys saw the same story, but like that. Even recently, didn't he like go back or somebody went back to Mizzou and like they did not have his picture up, even though he was like one of their first top 5 recruits and like
really,
yeah,
I did not read that.
And I could be fucking blowing this, but I'm pretty sure he said like they had just put it back up or something. And he's like, why the hell was my picture ever down? Kind of the recurring theme with him here is the disrespect.
It really is. I didn't even know that story.
Well, here's the thing, and we'll definitely get into it, I guess, later. But like, where does that come from?
I don't understand.
All of a sudden, like no matter what, he's always being shot down. Like, why? Is Missouri just like a shithole that just beats down people? Or
I doubt
what's the
it.
deal
Who
here?
knows? Who
That's
knows?
crazy.
A lot of times I like athletes or performers.
Sorry, Missouri. I didn't really.
I like people like these athletes and the performers that I understand on the surface. Like we talk on the podcast all the time about like Kanye West. Like I understand he's a jackass a lot of the time, right? Like so I get why people hate him, but like with Woodley, I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing wrong? I hear it sometimes in the interviews where he goes like a little bit too far, but I'm like, yeah, but 90% of what he said is true, and I'm like, if you can't pick up on that,
If all you take is that 10%, and I was one of them, if all you take that 10%, then you got to question your ability to think.
I think we just generally as a culture, we just doubt in general what people say. I think we believe a lot of BS, but I also think we doubt when we don't want to believe something. We don't want to believe he's being that mistreated because I think, and I don't want to get too psychological here, but I think sometimes when someone's saying they're being mistreated and Woodley says, race might play into it, if you're someone that's of a different race, you don't want to believe it because you think it's almost a reflection on you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, no, he can't be being mistreated because he's black, because that would somehow be saying something negative about you. Like, no, we're okay here. Everything's fine. Sure. You're just crying wolf.
But that's the main problem, is because everything gets lumped together. And this isn't a political podcast, but one white man does something, everybody thinks it's on them. Listen, I don't care what George does in Florida. That has nothing to do with me.
Sure.
Tyron doesn't care what anybody does. If it's a black man that gets in trouble or something, he might care because he wants the community to be like, but it doesn't affect him. We can't keep lumping like social interactions all together. Everybody's different. We are not the same just because we have the same skin tone.
Yep. I understand. I don't get it. I don't get it because, again, when you hear his cases, a lot of them make sense. I don't think he does himself any favors sometimes, but again, 90% of the time, spot on.
All right, so let's get back to the story here. So he's at ATT. They bring him in. He's working with the fighters, but he's essentially just a punching bag at this point. He's a sparring partner. He's hitting the bags kind of after practice with some of the other coaches and stuff. But talk about how he actually gets into fighting, because he's not in fighting at this point.
Yeah, because doesn't he? I think there's some local promoter who's doing small fights or something, and I think he literally walks into the guy's office or the guy's gym, and he's like, "Hey, when's your next card?" And the guy's like, 2 weeks. He's like, "I want on it." And I think the guy's like, "Is that you on the wrestling poster or some shit like that?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's me." And he's like, "Okay." And he gives him the shot, and I think it's like a 20-second knockout. And he's like, okay, with like zero striking experience.
Yep.
He's just got that wrestling base. And I think the second fight is like a 30-second knockout. And he's like, oh shit, I'm onto something.
And I want to say there was a story too, and I think it falls in line with this time frame where he's hitting the bags after practice just kind of for fun with the coaches, and his power level is just insane. Like he's getting the coach's attention. Like, holy crap, sure. This guy is hitting the bag better than we are, and he doesn't have any training.
Yeah, he went so long without any striking training, and he that good immediately.
You would never think that, because his striking is on point.
Yeah,
like that's his. So it must be his ability to learn, or he's just kind of always had the striking. We just know him as a wrestler.
Well, and as we go here and we see what he does to some of the greatest strikers in the world,
boy.
It's stunning.
Oh, boy.
I said, calm down.
Hey, you made your Falcons joke.
Yeah.
He gets to talk.
Oh, no. I'm prepared for that. I was just thinking again, going back to the Josh Koscheck, the best two-piece I've ever seen. Yeah, yep. I can't wait to get to that one.
All right. Well, after just 2 fights, Woodley would make his Strikeforce debut, picking up where he'd left off by submitting his first opponent in the opening round of the fight. And Tyron was just getting started at this point.
It was a submission by punches, though.
By punches,
too.
okay,
Yeah, just so everyone's clear, he wasn't like rear naked choking. He was punching him to the point where the guy quit. He was like, I'm done getting pounded in the face.
That's it.
So
thank you for that. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's good. So from there, he's going to go on an 8-fight win streak, putting his record at 10-0, and that would earn him a title shot against Nate Marquardt. But despite his gratitude for the opportunity to fight for the title, many supporters were questioning why it had taken so long. And this is really, I would say, the birth of this theme, but it goes back even earlier to that. But in at least his professional fighting, this is kind of the birth of that being overlooked, being passed over, because he's 10-0 and he's just finally getting a shot at the title.
I think the perception at that point in time was that he was sort of like the uncrowned champion, which, that kind of happens in this sport sometimes. Like, again, with the insiders here, I'm saying, almost like when Tito was champion and Liddell was kind of right below him. The idea here was for a year or so, he's the uncrowned champion. And again, this is at a time where Strikeforce is like everyone's favorite. Again, this is why when people lovingly talk about Strikeforce, Tyron Woodley, look at this roster. And how well it's aged, by the way. Here we are all these years later, and Woodley still champion.
Woodley,
Rockhold,
Cormier,
right
Rockhold.
there.
Had no idea he fought in Strikeforce for that long.
Isn't it unbelievable? Strikeforce was fucking out of control.
And Strikeforce is considered one of, like you said, it's up there with Pride. It's like one of the favorite organizations ever. And he was basically at the top for a very long time.
And people are going to shit on me for saying this, but it's the reality. Look, man, a lot of that Pride nostalgia is bullshit. Some of that shit was fixed. They were all on steroids. Look, I know PEDs were a thing, but they were encouraging it in Pride openly. The fights were fixed. Listen, Strikeforce was the real deal. Like that shit. And look at how the people came over from Pride didn't work out too well.
Correct.
For 95% of them. The Strikeforce guys, holy shit.
A lot of them became champions in the UFC.
Yeah. So he's running around as an uncrowned champion there for like a year, gets to Marquardt, and what I love about this, he just gets fucking massacred. And what I love is when you hear him talk about it, not only does he call it his favorite fight ever, but he openly admits that people make excuses for Woodley, and they say, hey, Marquardt was too big for you. It was a size thing. Woodley's like, no, look, I dropped him twice. I had him hurt, and he's like, he just wanted it more than me. And he's like, he was better than me that night. I made a mistake. I got lazy against the cage, and he knocked me the fuck out. And I'm like, that's a guy taking ownership for his fuck up, and I love it.
And it's taking ownership like that, and the reason he probably calls it his favorite fight is a learning lesson for someone like that, and it just feeds it. It's more fuel for that fire. Because he's going to take this and just run with it.
Well, we talk a lot about the way Conor handled the loss against Nate like a fucking man. And we're like, look at that. That's a guy, because Ronda ran from her losses and her demons. Conor embraced it. Woodley, every time he loses, he learns something from it. And like he says himself, he comes back with a brutal knockout the next time.
He does. That is a theme we will see.
He grows from every loss. And I think that's a problem with me is I see people lose and I start to identify them in that level. And I go, okay, yeah, but he can't beat Nate Marquardt. He can't beat Rory McDonald, so he's not for real. But see, there's people like him that grow from those losses that become champions.
Yep. So Woodley had been within arm's reach of gold, but had come up short. Yet it's often said of life that timing is everything. Shortly after the loss, the UFC, who had a year earlier acquired Strikeforce, began bringing over fighters, and among them was Tyron Woodley. Now under the banner of the largest fighting organization in the world, Woodley had a fresh start and a chance to show the world who he really was and what he was capable of accomplishing. And it would appear that was just what Woodley needed. Making his UFC debut in February of 2013, Woodley disposed of his opponent, veteran Jay Heron, in 36 seconds.
And can we talk about Heron for a second?
Please do.
So this is, again, like we said with Woodley, he's the uncrowned Strikeforce champion for a year. A lot of people sort of viewed Heron that way in Bellator. He was kind of the uncrowned champion. So now this is almost like a really mini super fight, right? Like, it's kind of cool to see the two guys clash. And I think the only person at that point to have finished him, the Heron, was GSP, right? So, again, to see Woodley dismantle him, that's really important. That's a really big deal. And he really kind of put everyone on notice,
I'm going to cut you there. Brad Blackburn finished him, and Jonathan Goulet.
Before that?
Right after GSP. So.
Right after.
Yeah, but he was on a 10-fight win streak.
Okay, there you go.
He was a monster, and I mean, he loses. The names he loses. Yeah, I don't know some, but Ben Askren, and then now recently Jake Ellenberger, and then now
he's at
down
the end
the
of
road.
down the road. But this guy was still a monster.
That's the thing about Woodley is again, we talk a lot about people. One of the Bones Taylor that you picked with the John Jones is that a lot of his legacy is built on beating people after their prime, right?
Correct.
Woodley is beating people in their prime. You know what I mean? We're gonna get to Wonder Boy. Mm-hmm. He just destroyed the Wonder Boy hype train, right? Damian Maia. He beats hype train. So again, don't even look past Huron here, who was a monster at the time. Had some setbacks, but again, so had Woodley, and just totally dismantles him.
Yeah, but the road to the top of the UFC is gonna be a little bit rockier than previous organizations. So even though he gets this massive win, his next fight is against veteran Jake Shields, and that is no easy
name
task.
Everybody knows. A decision. It was split, but
decision loss.
That was one
for
of those,
Woodley.
That was one of those fights I remember watching where again, this is back when I was a hater and I was rooting against Woodley, and I wanted Shields to win the decision, but I knew he probably didn't deserve it. And then Shields gets the decision. I'm super happy. And I look back and was like, God, I was a D-bag. Why do I do that?
This was a good Jake Shields, too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know who Jake Shields is now, he's a shadow of himself.
Yeah.
But this was, I won't say prime Jake Shields, but it's right around that time.
Probably fresh off the GSP Toronto fight. Yeah, I mean, this is...
So this is right around his prime.
Yeah. So again, it's like we said, split decision loss though, but rebounds right away.
There you go. So he rebounds, he comes back, fights Josh Koscheck. We were in attendance at that fight. Again, I liked Koscheck from his, days on The Ultimate Fighter and everything up from there, even though he was, kind of hated by many fans.
Yep.
I liked Koscheck. Holy smokes.
Listen. It was oh my God, it was stunning, I guess you could say, right? So it was stunning to watch it. You guys saw it live. It was stunning to watch it, but he stunned Koscheck to the point where he was frozen in the air for a good 2-3 seconds to hit him 2 more times and then just cave him. What? That was incredible. And I said it back when we did 167. That was the best 2-piece that I've ever seen anybody do. It was so
clean. Those are those scary knockouts where you're like, hey, Koscheck, you should go away for a long time. That's scary, man.
That was rough.
So then after that, he has the loss to
Rory.
But,
he beat Carlos.
In between there, and the Carlos one is an important one because I feel like, again, it's like there's these little tipping points with these fighters, these just little things that add up, and I feel like every time he gets momentum going, that Condit win should have been a very big deal, but the way it happened, and again, I believe it was a kick by him that led to the injury, right? Or was it a kick or a takedown attempt? I don't remember, but Carlos blows out the ACL.
Blows out his knee.
But Tyron caused it, okay? And even at the time, again, I'm sitting there going, that's a fluke injury, that's bullshit. But he caused it in the fight.
It's no different than Michael Chandler getting hit in the back of the calf and his leg can't function and his nerves aren't there. He still caused it. He didn't get credit for that win, and nobody likes him.
Mighty Mouse just did to Cejudo, which Cejudo fought through with
I was calling bullshit that night. I said, no way, that's bullshit. Fuck that. He didn't plan that. That is an actual thing that is planned.
Anderson Weidman.
Well, okay. The kick?
The kick,
right,
yeah. I mean, I hate it. Look,
it.
As an Anderson fan, I hate that. I still think that is like a 1 in a million thing, but it was because Weidman...
The Destroyer. They literally had a name for it. They had trained to stop the leg kicks. That was the whole thing after the first fight was this. The first thing the coach said is, I hate how much damage he took the elite leg kicks in the first round, referring to Weidman. And so they trained the whole time for leg kicks, and Anderson threw one in the second fight, totally prepared, and he broke his leg. And he had, I believe,
shattered.
He had done that to people. I don't know about broken, but he had injured people in camp with it. So they were fully prepared for that, and people call it a fluke. So if you go back to this, Woodley should get all the credit in the world for that Condit win, and he doesn't, and it continues to slow his growth as a star.
It does, because at this point, Tyron Woodley is 3-2 in the UFC. I mean, that's kind of a terrible record.
Don't
but
say terrible. I know.
I mean, 3-2 is bad,
right.
But when you look back, your 2 losses are to Rory and Jake Shields, and the loss to Shields is a split decision. I mean,
And Rory's an absolute monster.
Rory's just a
the Rory
killer at
story
this
is
point.
not over at all. He'll probably be back in the UFC.
But that was the thing, is like Woodley is showing flashes of brilliance here, but he's also prompting these questions that we had about his ability to hang with the very elite of the UFC. And perhaps in the end, Woodley would just be seen as one of those fighters who deserve to be taken seriously by any opponent, but he would never be looked at as like a true contender. And that's what we believed.
I believe he's almost like one of those. He is an athlete that kind of like plays up to his opponent, and so again, he just like needs that opportunity. Now, granted, he laid an egg with Marquardt, but how much of that is a Strikeforce thing? I don't know. I don't know if he wanted to be in the Big Show. I have no idea. Did he?
Maybe he was already in talks with the Big Show, and stuff's like in his way. Like I don't know how much that would affect him. Like that would almost make you want to perform even more. You want to get to the UFC.
Well, he was a young. He was a young fighter. Let's remember, he didn't throw a punch until a trained punch.
No, I got you.
Until after college.
True.
So it's not like he grew up practicing martial arts. So
absolutely,
the Marquardt loss, that's a big moment. There's a lot of expectations. Like you said, he was kind of, I don't know if he was the favorite. We would have to go back and look at that. But there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders at that point.
Also the Uber Marquardt era, where he was like submitting like horse piss or something for his drug test, and so he was just watch out.
After you just talked about how awesome Strikeforce was compared to Pride.
Hey, at least they got punished for it. Hey, I said they didn't encourage it.
That's
he got
right.
punished
No,
for it.
you're
How
right.
dare you?
You're right. So yeah, it's this really conflicting kind of thing. He like takes one step forward, 2 steps back kind of thing, but he always bounces back with a vengeance, and he's gonna come back from his loss to Rory as well, because from a young age, like we saw in his childhood, he's in the business of proving his doubters wrong. So in his very next fight, much like he'd done after the Nate Marquardt and the Jake Shields fight, Woodley bounces back, finishing stun gun Dong Young Kim in 61 seconds and earning a Performance of the Night bonus. But those paying close attention to Woodley's career had seen this before, like we said, and they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. Win 1 or 2, lose 1. Win 1 or 2, lose 1. Only this time, it wouldn't happen. In his next fight, Woodley would scrape out a split decision win over a heavy Kelvin Gastelum. Why are you laughing?
I'm sorry, that's funny.
Why?
Heavy Kelvin Gastelum.
Well, he was heavy for that fight.
I'm just visualizing him. Have you ever stumbled upon this podcast and like gets to that part? It's like imagine the heavy Zach Ratton. I'd be like, damn it! Like heavy Tim Thomas. Fuck! I was heavy at that point.
God.
Well, here's the thing. In case you weren't watching at that point, Gastelum had missed weight.
Catch weight.
And yeah, Woodley had the choice. Like, you can fight this guy, or you cannot fight him, and he decides to fight him at a catch weight at 180.
Well, again, because I don't know how much we're going to get back to Gastelum as this episode goes on, he's an important one to mention here because, Gastelum loses this fight after missing weight badly, and I think he ends up right away getting a coaching spot on, like, Tough, the one Latin America, or whatever the one they did. He coached down there. The one that Yair won, I think Yair Rodriguez wins it. He coaches there, and the UFC, again, promoting him. And he, has some losses, some wins, misses weight a ton, and now, coming off of some bullshit wins, he's getting another title shot. The UFC gets behind Kelvin Gastelum so fucking much.
For what?
And he's messing up.
And the drug tests. And, I mean, look, I don't know for sure, but like Woodley seems to make an awful lot of references to weed in some of the interviews that he has. But guess what? Never failed the drug test. Gastelum does. Gastelum misses weight. Woodley makes weight. Why do they get behind Kelvin Gastelum, who's just a terrible example? Terrible example. Some people have just said he's lazy with his diet, flat out. And they get behind him, not Woodley.
Stick around for the podcast when we do Kelvin Gastelum as an episode and we change our mind on him.
I'll never change my mind on that fuck. He took Weidman's title shot. I'm out.
He's fired up.
That's very
Weidman beat
true.
his ass, and he's getting a title shot. Why doesn't Weidman get the title shot?
We talked about it. Oh,
Yep.
my goodness.
Okay, so Tim is fired up for the rest of the episode.
But here's the thing. Like, let's not skip over that. Not only is it a catch weight at 180, 10 pounds over what they're supposed to fight, but Gastelum's going into this fight 10-0. So he's coming in there. There's this hype train, and the thing that we've talked about before, and he ends it. He beats him. And, again, we don't have to go into it, but like I don't know why Gastelum's getting this rub.
Exactly.
But Woodley is there beating these guys, ending these hype trains, and nothing's happening.
And, okay, to your point, number one, like you said, guy in his prime, right there. He's derailing him. And think about 2018, where we're at right now, where fighters missing weight, or what are they, 10-1, or like some insane record, and he smashes him. So again, look no further than his opponent, who we'll get to, who missed weight, Till. I'm sure we'll get to that, and he's getting a title shot.
Oh, well, no. Before we get to that, let's get to his next opponent. After the Gastelum fight, Mr. Johnny Hendricks. We all know he's known for making weight. Oh, boy.
Doesn't even make it to the scale, right?
Can't even make it to the scale. Fight gets canceled. So, God bless Big Rig's heart. So Woodley is just, man, again, it's like the funding getting canceled. Like, he's trying. He's getting the 10-0 Gastelum. Can't make weight. All right, don't worry.
Title contender.
Don't worry. Next, you're getting Johnny Hendricks. Coming off of those
number one contenders fight. They've just billed as it was a big part of the pay-per-view, or it was going to be, it was a pay-per-view, I believe. Big part of it, number one contenders fight. His opponent doesn't make it to the scale, so the
Woodley
UFC says, you're next.
Yep.
And what do we all do, everyone in this room? What did we all say? Fuck Tyron Woodley.
Yep, he hasn't earned it.
We said that.
Because what did we do? We did exactly what anybody else could probably have done. We went out, he started out his UFC career 3-2. Then he wins a couple fights and then wins and ekes out a split decision against Gastelum. And now he's getting a title shot?
Yep, we were calling bullshit.
He went 10-0 in Strikeforce before he got a title shot. He was like 4-2, 4-3, whatever in the UFC, and he's getting a title shot? Come on.
I was calling bullshit till about 2 months ago.
This is why I hate myself, though, because this is when they were like doing things right, and they were rewarding the guy at the time who was he was like making weight, and they're like, it's not your fault, you're gonna get a title shot, and here I am, a dumbass, and I'm like, that's bullshit. And I look back at myself.
You know, I think it has to do, like, I'm not much of a Robbie Homer as you guys, but it's one of those things that I think you guys were pissed because it was Robbie. And it was like, why is he facing this guy type of thing? Like, you knew there was power behind Woodley, but you didn't know what would happen. Like, for me, it was, he doesn't deserve it.
Well,
like,
you know what? Actually, what I thought, what I thought? I thought Tyron doesn't deserve it. He's not as marketable. And he's probably just going to wrestle him because he knows he's not going to stand with, there's no way he's going to stand with him. And then Woodley just does what he always does and just completely proves his doubters wrong, including us.
I just don't get why we have to be this way. It's like, why in my life, why do I always have to look back at myself? It's like you look back at like the bowl cut, you look back through your life at all your fucking stupid ass outfits you were wearing. At what point, at what age do I look back at myself and not go, I was a fucking idiot? Because I was an idiot. Like, I'm going to look back at this year and be like, well, I'm a dumbass. So when is that when like you're 60?
I don't know. I can't wait for Zach to look back on his outfit that he's wearing for this podcast.
Oh, dude.
I'm just joking. I like your pink polo. You keep wearing that, buddy.
Idiots.
Well, I think I was pissed off because... and we'll get into it right after this, is Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy was on his way up, and he beat Johnny Hendricks, someone that, well, this might have been afterwards, but Jake Ellenberger, Patrick Cote, Robert Whittaker, who's now a champion. Yeah. Then he goes and beats Rory, and then he finally gets one. He kind of got the Woodley treatment. He's knocking all these people off, and just gets a title shot. And I was pissed because Woodley got a title shot off of a split decision win against Gastelum.
Yep.
Like, which we're doing, and we have to be fair, we're doing the same thing with Gastelum. Our issues with him losing to Weidman aside, part of it is we're looking at his, you're eking out, this terrible win, and then you're getting a title shot off of that. Who gets a title shot off a split decision win? It's kind of crazy. I'm not saying we'll come around on
coming off against people like Bisping at 1 week, 2 weeks notice, Bisping had just fought 3 weeks prior.
Well, no, 3 weeks prior,
retiring.
And he was filling in.
Yeah,
it was a no contest against Vitor. He won, but it was marijuana, so he gets dinged for that. Loses to Weidman in the third round submission, right? And we're like, yes, Weidman's back. I know you were fired up.
Sure was.
And then he beats Bisping, who is one fight removed from the title against GSP, And now everyone's like, oh, Gastelum this, Gastelum that. I'm sorry. But Bisping was on his way out.
Yeah, don't forget Jacare.
Old man Jacare.
But that's the one I'm talking about.
Oh,
that was
yeah.
a split decision, right?
It was a split decision.
Yeah.
And that was after Jacare just got his brand new deal. And what is that? Always happens. That happens to quarterbacks in the NFL. That happens to baseball players in the MLB. It just happens. When you get that new contract, for some reason, they take a dump in the first fight or second fight.
Yeah, and I mean, we shouldn't take anything away from Gastelum because he's fighting who's put in front of him. He's beating Jacare, who's game. But this is the issue. This is what you as a listener and what we try to, if we're going to make these mistakes, if we're going to see the sport and view these things the way we do and form these opinions, like Tim said at the beginning of this podcast, we just have to be willing in the future to change our mindset, to look back on that and go, you know what? I was wrong. And I fully admit I was wrong. Mm-hmm. We're joking about Gastelum. Maybe we'll look back. Maybe we won't. I don't think we'll ever look back and go, oh, it was fine. He missed weight. It was fine with the drug test. That's different. I think just in terms of looking at his record and looking at who he's beat, you can always spin the narrative however you want when it comes to opponents. But look, here's the bottom line. Woodley was doing things the right way, and he continues to do that to this day.
Yep.
He's beating who's put in front of him. He's doing it the right way. He's a professional about it. What more can you ask of a guy?
Well, the big thing here is that, look, we could talk all day about whether or not he deserved the title shot, whether we were right or wrong. And look, looking back, we believe he did. But the bottom line is that when he got in the cage, not only did he knock out Robbie Lawler, but he set the new record for welterweight. And at that point, that is the minute my opinion changes, because if the person gets in there, if Woodley had gotten in there and gotten embarrassed, we could have been like, see, that's why he shouldn't have got the title shot. But the bottom line is he did belong, and he set the fucking record for knockout.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly the point that I was going to make, because we talk so much off record that I sometimes forget what we've talked about, but I don't think you've said that on here. We all thought he didn't belong, but he went in there and knocked Robbie out. It doesn't fucking matter anymore.
It's all over at that point.
It does not matter. And when you made that point, we talk these fight nights all the time. We always make these points. But yeah, when you said that, then I was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense, because who cares if we didn't think he didn't belong? But the fact that he went in there and did it, it just proves that, okay, he does belong here.
Yep. That's the Darren Till argument right now, is that Till does not have the resume to deserve the shot that's coming up, and he missed weight. But none of it matters, because if he beats him, if Till wins, he's the fucking champion. Exactly. And none of it matters.
That's right. So from the streets of Ferguson, Missouri to the top of the UFC's welterweight division, Woodley had cemented his legacy at this point. But for Tyron Woodley, the belt represented more than just a cap to his mixed martial arts career. It was a symbol of hard work and a proper mindset. Not only his own, but his mother's, his coaches, his teammates, his friends. It represented possibility. And Tyron would carry his belt and that message with him wherever he went. And when it comes time to retire, Woodley may have to relinquish his title, but he has no intentions of letting go of its message.
I think, being the, person he is and where he's come from, and having that mindset of, I'm the champion, I'm going to use this for the better, whether it's, taking kids from the neighborhood and giving them sports programs, or just helping just teach inner city youth for any reason, whether it's wrestling, whether it's any type of sport, whether it's getting them into school, like just keeping them off the streets and where they grew up, where he grew up. You can't ask for a better champion mentality.
You just got to remember that when he got his chance, when he got his money, all these people like John Jones go out there and they set the worst fucking example in the goddamn world. Tyron Woodley got his money,
paid it back,
and the very first thing he did is remember those moments getting off that bus and being like, should I be a bully? Am I going to get bullied or be the bully? And he went and said, you know what? I got to give these kids guidance. And you can go look up the videos of him talking to these kids in this gym and these gyms that he's providing for them and these programs to keep them off the streets and give them a choice and an option and a way out, and go, that's what he decided to do with his money. is take care of those kids.
Bought his mom a house.
Exactly.
He goes and teaches kids. He
That's
puts
every
money
kid's
and
dream
funding
is like,
into
I'm going to
it.
buy my mom
Yep.
a house. He went full circle.
And this is what the average fan misses, because you see NFL Play 60, where the NFL stars are going to Boys and Girls Clubs and playing with the kids for 60 minutes a day. Like, that's cool and everything, but are they going to the troubled neighborhoods? Are they going into, out of their comfort zone? And I'm not saying this is out of Woodley's comfort zone, because I don't think it is. This is where he grew up. This is what he knows, and this is how he knows how to get out of it. So he's helping them. But he's doing it in areas that need it the most. He's not doing it in areas that, kind of need it, maybe not. That's my issue with a big organization that we both know. And they have a program where they save, like, say, youth sports. But they do it for schools that don't necessarily need the savings, instead of going to, say, your inner city and doing it for them who need new weights or who need new shoulder pads for football, something.
Not only is he giving back to his hometown, but what I love about him is he even has the balls to go out there when people like Trump are going off about Ferguson, and he calls out Trump and is like, no, Ferguson's not a dump. There are areas of that town that are beautiful. We're just doing our best that we can with the other parts of Ferguson. Yep. And I'm like, holy shit.
Every town has a shit part.
Yes.
And, okay, so two things I want to say about this, too. When those riots happened in Ferguson, Woodley also went on the record, and he didn't give it a pass. He said, I don't like what's happening here. I'm not in support of what is going on. Like,
did you see that's when he embraced that's
yes.
actually when he changed his hometown from St. Louis to Ferguson, is when it all went down, and he said he like basically identified with it and was like, look, that's where I'm from. We got to fix this shit.
Yes.
Like,
this is not acceptable.
Right.
Instead of just saying, hey, I'm from there, you can't talk shit about where I'm from. He's like, I'm from here. This is not acceptable. We need to fix this. We need to change this. And the other thing that it just dawned on me as we were kind of reading through this and talking through this, it's interesting to me that here's a guy who, like you said, has his TMZ segment, has YouTube, he's well-spoken, he's an analyst, so he has a career set up after the UFC. And when someone asks him, what are your plans after you retire? It's not, I want to keep being an analyst. I want to do this. It's, I'm going to dedicate my time to giving back.
Exactly.
Which is weird because he's not a fighter who has nothing, he's like, well, I got nothing besides fighting. I may as well give back. It's like, yeah, I could be an analyst for the rest of my life. No. My plan is to take what I earn here and give it back.
But why do we celebrate Uriah Faber for being an entrepreneur when Woodley is doing all the same things? But again, his answer is not, I want to give back to like Team Alpha Male. He wants to give back to the youth. He doesn't get 10% of how these kids do in the future. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He actually has the best interest of everyone in mind, and there's no doubt about it.
And not to mention, and I'm gonna shoot my own boy down, is Uriah did it. He's doing what he's doing, but he was never a champion. Like, Tyron is a champion doing this. Like, he
in the UFC.
In the UFC, he's trying to use this platform to be a better person and to make other people better around him. Not that Uriah didn't do that.
I was going to say, we should clarify. We love Uriah Faber.
I love Uriah Faber, but it's
exactly.
One of those...
This is a different class of a person. Yeah. Uriah Faber is an amazing entrepreneur,
absolutely.
A great guy, very charismatic. But Woodley is like changing lives, not fighters' lives, not people trying to get to Team Alpha Male. This is kids that are in trouble.
But it gets pushed aside because of how something happens in the octagon.
Yeah, I mean, so let's go over the title run here. So he is the very first defense against Wonderboy.
Yep.
In the biggest event of all time.
Yep.
Okay, co-main event, Conor Eddie Alvarez, amazing fight.
Yep.
Fight of the night, badass, ends up being a draw. Again, a bunch of confusion because a New York commission's a disaster and announces it as a split for him at first. Then it's a draw, so people are frustrated. Look, that fight was fucking awesome. Fight of the night. Immediate rematch. He's taking on the number one guy. Sure, he's being smart. He's a shrewd businessman. In between here, he's asking for the big money fights. That's what all the fighters are doing now. But when push comes to shove and he gets offered the fight, he even takes the Wonder Boy rematch. That is a bit of a disaster. Now, but let me ask you guys this. We all know the second fight. We all know everyone's going into that weekend super hostile because Tony and Khabib gets called off at the last second, so everyone's angry.
Once again.
The fight is a bit of a disaster, but again, like Woodley says, he completely neutralizes people like Wonder Boy and Maia. Completely. And we had a big fight the night of the Maia fight because he neutralizes these people. Why is it when people like Mayweather do it, it's considered a masterpiece in boxing? It's like, look, they can't even touch him. Woodley shuts shit down, and it's like, that's a boring fucking fight. Why?
It shows you the fan base. It shows you the fan base is more barbaric than technicality. It's just the way it is. We found that out, unfortunately, like back in May, we started thinking about like, holy shit, this is what we're dealing with here. Like, they do that. And I think, you know, it starts with not only do they get called off the card, but that is the worst poster of all time. So the promotion sucks after that. Right?
That is what's kind of comical. Is from top to bottom, it's a disaster promoting him.
It's just terrible. And then, you know, like he does shut him down. And that's something, being one of my favorite fighters, that pisses me off because I know what Wonder Boy can do. But he did exactly what he was supposed to do to win that fight. And he made a good point. And this is one of the first times that I've agreed with him. He's the champion. If someone wants that belt, they need to take it from him. He does not need to go out there and necessarily put on this spectacular show. We'd all love to see it, but that is a spectacular show. Him stopping one of the best counter-strikers of all time and doing that. Like, it's just...
He is writing the blueprint for how to beat these people.
Yeah.
Once he beats them, he like writes the blueprint and everybody follows him.
Wonder Boy.
Right.
7-fight win streak. Maia. 7-fight win streak. Shut them down.
And once he beats them, like Lawler and shit, these people,
they start losing.
Exactly.
Wonder Boy lost to Till. Maia ended up losing to Colby.
I don't remember who Lawler fought. Was it straight to RDA? Who did he fight anyone before he lost to RDA?
Can't remember, but he lost. Yeah,
he lost
just after that.
It's like this guy goes, brings in amazing people into his camp. He's very cerebral, sets an amazing blueprint. Like people say, listen to Joe Rogan. He'll tell you that's exactly how you have to fight Wonder Boy. And then people go in and follow the blueprint. Why is it held against him? He writes the blueprint against Maia, and look what happens now. People like Covington can go in and beat him. I just don't think it's fair.
So let's get to these questions in sort of the end of our episode here. So that is essentially the story of the chosen one, Tyron Woodley. And now that you know his story, like I said, you may feel a certain way about him one way or the other, but regardless of how you feel about his fighting style, his personality, or the way he uses his platform as a fighter to speak out, one thing we can all agree on is that Tyron Woodley has earned his place in the UFC and in life. And it doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon, so buckle in. But that doesn't mean you can't have your opinions. And it doesn't mean there's nothing to discuss concerning Woodley and his story. So as always, we like to end the show with our takeaways and dig a bit deeper beneath the surface of the story, down into the untold reaches where others seldom go. So let's take it there. Let's get your takeaways, and then let's talk about why he's not promoted. Let's talk about if it's deserved, and let's talk about, does he have a point to his claims, or does he need to tone it down a little bit?
Okay, one thing, first of all, is I just think one thing that needs to be dismissed immediately is the whole idea that he picks fights, because he doesn't. He's
is that
smart.
A thing?
Absolutely,
wow.
It's a thing. They say he's trying to pick fights, that he wants the big money fight, and that he keeps
Of
holding
course he
out.
wants a big money fight.
Like he says, he signs all the contracts the minute he gets them. And the reality is, to those people criticizing him for picking fights, the real person picking fight is like a GSP. Because he can, but he's picking his fight. He went up, he picked Bisping. Everybody knew what was going on there. Even George said it was a good fight for him. George is the one playing the stock market game, air quotes.
And now he's trying to pick the winner of Conor and Khabib.
Right. Meanwhile, there's a guy going through that's wrecking everybody that's the true linear welterweight champion who's sitting there waiting and calling out GSP, fights in a similar fashion with that strong wrestling base, the good striking. Mm-hmm. Just remember, it's your boy GSP that's picking fights. And it's the same GSP who had all those fights in a row that bored everyone to death. But we all love him. We all cheered when he came back.
I was going to make that point.
Shit on
Thank
Woodley.
You. Yes.
So just be fair. It's a double standard.
So let me ask you guys this. I want to get to kind of what we take away, but we can save that for the end. Let me ask you this question, because Woodley makes the comparison. He says, look, I'm being mistreated and promoted improperly, poorly promoted, not promoted at all, and it's because I'm black. And he says, look no further than the person who's talked about as the greatest pound-for-pound fighter, Mighty Mouse. Now, I know Mighty Mouse has recently lost, and if you're listening to this episode, maybe 2 years from now, we don't know what's going to happen with him. But at the time that Woodley is saying this, Mighty Mouse is on this crazy, crazy run, and he's not being promoted. Does Woodley have a claim there in that comparison, or is a better comparison not Mighty Mouse, but like you said, GSP is the better comparison? Here's a guy who shut people down and went to decisions with them, and he's being promoted like crazy. Why am I not being promoted?
So for me, this sort of falls into that 10% where I disagree with him. I understand what he's saying, and I understand that could be a bit of an issue. But I looked at people like Rampage Jackson, John Jones. They got a major rub. They're African-American, and it worked. Everything. Look, this is no fault of Woodley's. He's doing everything right, and for some reason, it's not clicking. I don't know if that's on the fan base, the UFC, all the above. For me, it's not necessarily a race thing.
I'm going to say this is where we asked this question a couple months back. Is Conor good or bad for the sport? And I think Conor and Tyron's situation is bad because you're getting that. We're in the era now where if you're not exciting like Conor, then you suck or you're not promotable, or that's Dana has gotten this mentality, I think, with Ronda being who she was, and then Conor coming in here and literally taking over the entire sport. But then you have like a wrecking ball coming through and just destroying all the number one contenders. And he's not promotable. Why? Because he's beating them at their own game. That's not something to down him about.
Can I say, I think, here's what I think. I think that whenever this UFC, your job, your home, wherever you go, there will be times where you will voice a concern or you will voice an injustice, and people around you will only see it as complaining. And people hate complaining. And they immediately dismiss what you're saying, and they immediately dump on you. Mm-hmm. Even if they have experienced it themselves. I will meet people that will have gone through the same exact thing that I've gone through. I will say, man, this really sucks. And instead of agreeing, they either try to one-up you. Well, I had that happen, and this, and this. Okay, so you should be able to empathize with me. But instead, you're telling me to stop complaining. Mm-hmm. I think what's happened is Tyron Woodley has been vocal. He's spoken out, and he likes to say, like, hey, look, Muhammad Ali spoke out. All these other sports icons and activists spoke out, and they weren't well received initially, and now they're heroes, they're legends. He's like, I'm speaking out. I'm not being well received, but maybe over time you'll see what I'm saying. And look, I'm with you, Tim. That 10%, it's it's a little iffy. I think he goes a little too far, but sometimes hyperbole, sometimes that is effective. I think the problem is that if Conor sees an injustice, he approaches it in a different way. He says, that's mine, I'm going to take it, and he talks shit around it. Tyron says, that's mine, why aren't you doing this? I'm pissed off, what's going on? I honest to goodness think it literally just has to do with the way he is approaching it. Yep, I really do. He's valid in his complaints.
And two things here.
100%.
Number one, he's alluded many times to some type of injustice behind the scenes that he will not mention. And people like Ariel Helwani have backed it up and said there's shit we don't know that's going on behind the scenes. But again, he's a class act, and he's like, I don't want to go there. He's like, please, let's not go there. He doesn't want to bring it up, okay? Just so we're clear, there might be more to this race thing that we're not getting.
The biggest complaint, I'm going to add just to that, the biggest complaint about Ariel, too, is that he doesn't say anything about it. And people complain that, he's too much of a crybaby, I guess what? That's the same thing that was being said about Woodley. So, and you see Ariel's one of the most respected MMA journalists there is, and then you have Woodley, who now, in my eyes, I respect him a lot more than I do a lot of fighters in this company or in MMA in general, because I know his story. Maybe he will get that eventually.
I think the real issue here is not necessarily a race thing. It's just that the promoter doesn't necessarily have their shit together. I think when you look at big companies like Elon Musk with Tesla, Jeff Bezos with Amazon, they have a master plan, right? And then you kind of have that in between, like we've talked about in the past with WWE, Vince McMahon. Half the time it looks like they know what they're doing. Half the time you think they're fucking clueless and they have no long-term plan. I think the bottom line is the UFC doesn't have many long-term plans at all. And I think they luck into a lot of things. Sometimes it works for them, sometimes it doesn't. And I just think they do not know what to do with Tyron Woodley at all. I even think that he has sort of stumbled upon some big rival. Like, he's almost the fighter that has found his rivals. Like when he found Wonder Boy, right? That's a big-time rivalry. And a lot of times, like with Chael with Anderson, the rival is what catapults them to superstars. But these two were so evenly matched that it actually negated each other. And what could have been a classic rivalry kind of killed his hype. So, my question for you is the biggest missed opportunity in his career, is it on him and the fact that he's not embracing the Covington feud? Because the Covington feud could be the big rivalry, which plays into the race stuff. Covington is kind of a jackass. We say on this podcast he's good for the sport because he gets people talking, but, I mean, Woodley feuds with Trump. Covington embraces Trump. Race is a big part of this. The UFC's behind Covington. They're not behind Woodley. Is this the feud? Is him not doing that a big thing?
I don't think it's him not doing it. I think it's actually perfect. I think if he beats Till and Covington's still there, it just gives more time to build Woodley up, to build Covington up, so that when they finally do clash, it means even more than it means right now.
But we've said it before.
I think
what
it's
if he
okay.
What if he knocks Covington out in St. Louis in pay-per-view?
Yeah.
What if that happens?
Huge.
The crowd would go fucking crazy,
Huge.
and then you have a superstar in your hands. Maybe he gets the GSP fight. Maybe they do the Conor fight, which was rumored for a little bit, right? Maybe he gets a Nate fight. I think there is a path. We talk on this podcast about like the 5 degrees of Conor McGregor or whatever.
Yep.
I actually think he's very much in the mix for a gigantic money fight.
Well,
soon.
and if that somehow comes about, then all he has to do is cite one of the biggest injustices in his mind, and that's the night Conor McGregor won his second belt, and then they took it from Woodley backstage because they didn't have a belt to give McGregor.
So they took away during his photo shoot. He was doing the photo in the background. They took away his belt to give it to Conor.
And that's one of the things he said. Why are you taking my belt?
Yep.
Exactly. And it was a respect thing, too, because Woodley wasn't giving it up, but it was a guy who has been with Woodley since the beginning, who has been on his side, who has backed him up with things, asked him, hey, can we use this belt, please? Like, it was a respect thing. That's why he let him use it. Because
when push comes to shove, Woodley does the right thing.
He delivers.
And the problem is that then the fucking UFC doesn't have his back when there's one boring fight and the crowd starts booing. Dana White says, you left question marks. This isn't, you're not the true champion. That's not how you promote. That's not what you do.
And I set the phone down in the middle just to bring up, we talked about 209 poster. 228, it's awful. Like, I understand Till is a bigger guy, but he's the champion. You do not have him necessarily bigger and looking down at him. Like, Till's not the champion, 1. 2, he looks like a duck face, okay? They did some kind of Photoshop to Till's face. It looks like shit. You cannot promote that. When you look at the previous card before that, 227, same idea. You had the main event facing each other. You had the co-main facing each other. But there were so many details around it. There was a rip down the middle because you can tell they're feuding between the Dillashaw and Garbrandt. Yes. There's a rip down the middle. You have to add that stuff, and they're not doing it.
And there's, to your exact point here, there's a time and a place for that, right? Like when Daniel Cormier is this small frame guy and Rumble Johnson is a scary monster who's destroying everyone. It makes sense when they're having him loom over him on a poster, right? When Nick Diaz is this terror hanging over George St. Pierre, who's like ruining his life. It makes sense to have him looming over him. But Tyron Woodley Tyron Woodley is the new boogeyman. He beats everybody, he neutralizes everything, and he knocks everybody out. He's setting records for the quickest knockouts. Why are we making him look small against Till? The story is not small Tyron Woodley. It's can Till hang with one of the best welterweights ever? They're not even marketing him at all.
At all. And you know, going into the Wonder Boy Till fight, I was torn because I like them both. I like Till. Wonder Boy's obviously one of my top 2 favorites of all time. But I like Till. I just do. But for me, it's Woodley's time. And it goes back to, it goes again like, you know, Till's young. He can still fight. I'm not saying Woodley's not young, because he is. He's in his prime.
36, though. We're getting towards the end here.
I think he's in his prime just because he started so late.
True, less mileage.
Less mileage, and the way he has been able to pick it up. That's why I would say that. It's not like that 32 or like 30 prime. But, you know, Till will have his time. And Till said some questionable things here in the past month or so. That's
why
like,
is he still the guy?
What the fuck? And everybody's on the train, right? Except like you'll get like the women who have hopped off. And your purists that have hopped off.
Just for people that don't know, Till basically made comments that he doesn't care about his pregnant girlfriend or his daughter, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, he's the fan favorite going against Tyron Woodley. I know we're really championing Tyron Woodley, but people need to hear this shit. It's really important, and this is what we're here for.
You got to know the story.
So, all right, let's get some quick takeaways here, because what I don't want is for our listener to think that we are complaining. We're complaining about the promotion. We're complaining about this. We're championing Woodley. Is that the takeaway from Woodley's story, that he's not being promoted? Is that what the listener should take away? Is that when you look at Tyron Woodley, is that the first thing that you think about, or that you should think about when you see Tyron Woodley?
For me, I'm not sure if this answers your question, but doing this research and coming here today, this was an awesome throwback to why this podcast got created. It was just a fun, like, going through his story. I didn't know he was one of 13 kids. I didn't know that story about him losing his house. And I was like, holy shit, people need to know this, because there are going to be people out there that don't like him that are going to go, oh shit, he's pretty awesome. And that's just why we're here. It's not necessarily a shot at the UFC. They are doing a lot of shit wrong. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like, look, man, there are specials. There are they try to talk about it, but the word just doesn't. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more on the broadcast. Maybe it needs to be like boxing, where they go, hey, like the Contender Series. We were watching that clip on Contender Series. They're going over people's backstories about their moms, this and that, right before the fight, right? Maybe that's what these actual fight nights need to be. Hey, here, I know we're on pay-per-view. I know you already bought it. But by the way, for the guy at the bar, or your friend who's sitting on the couch that's never seen the UFC before, this is what happened in his past. So you don't have to try to tell him over all your friends' voices. This is what's happened in the past. This is why you should care about this guy's fight, and maybe they'd get behind him.
You know, I think with John Anik being, I'm assuming he's going to be a part of that announcing crew, the 3 that are there. You know, him going to St. Louis and being with him and talking with his mom and getting that feel. I think he'll do that a bit on the broadcast. It's just a matter of, you know, are people at that point, the main event, you can't do it right before the main event, I feel. I think you have to do it right at the beginning of the night. Like, beginning of the pay-per-view or even the prelims.
It's all about, I just think 90% of people, 95% of fans, hell, 98% of fans can't relate to hitting mitts in an MMA gym and rolling around doing jiu-jitsu. That means nothing, but you see the clip of his mom and you hear the story of her working 3 jobs and losing the house, people can relate to that shit.
3 people on this podcast can relate to just that alone.
And that's where you get fans.
Well, let me tell you what else it does. It does what it did to us. Once you read that, you're more forgiving of a non-exciting, quote-unquote, exciting fight. So the guy at the bar who just wants to see the knockout, when he sees Tyron Woodley dispatch Damian Maia and neutralize him, he can't appreciate that. But if he knows Woodley's story, he can appreciate the win. He can appreciate the victory. And then it will help tone down some of that bitter taste in people's mouths after these fights, when Dana maybe wouldn't have to feel like he's got to go out and trash his champion just to kind of save face. Like, oh, no, we don't like that either. We want him to knock out people just like you do, fan at the bar. He doesn't have to say that if there's a story behind these people. Then the guy, I get it, not every drunk guy at the bar is going to give a shit about his story. But for some people, if they know that stuff, they'll be more forgiving.
Sure.
And that will really go. So in a way, it does come full circle. I mean, Woodley's had to fight and claw his entire life, get everything he's ever wanted. He's had to earn himself. He's doing it in every aspect of his career right now. And he's getting no help. And he's asking for help. He's speaking out against injustice. More power to him. I think the big thing is, if he can just get a little bit of it, if he can just get a little bit of push from the UFC, it can change everything. It really could.
A lot of people talk about how important like Ireland is to the Irish are for McGregor, and that following the Russians for Khabib. Well, the UFC struggles to connect with the African American community. They're big time behind boxing, and it's just not connecting. He is like the exact person. He goes on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne. It's a great interview. It's totally authentic.
Fantastic interview.
He freestyles. He does one of his own raps, and Charlemagne gives him shit, but even the other two people are like, that wasn't half bad. He raps, and it honestly wasn't embarrassing. It wasn't terrible. He's totally fits on that show. Awesome interview. And I'm like, man. And you know what's funny is at the end of that same interview, Charlemagne throws in, hey, you wanted to promote the pay-per-view this weekend at Barclays, which was like Rose fighting. It was not him. And he literally goes, oh, shit. I'm supposed to promote that. I thought I was just here to promote myself. So the UFC set up the interview with him to go on Breakfast Club, and it wasn't even for him. They don't give a shit. They're just trying to sell tickets at Barclays. So it's like they know he's a fit, but they can't do it. He means so much to them big picture. Give him the GSP fight. Push him. He can sell tickets and pay-per-views.
I think this is going to be real weird. I think he's DC without the UFC behind him, and he doesn't have a John Jones looming over him. He's beating the greatest, like the best in the division, like DC is, but he doesn't have that push.
Well, like Tim said, he might need that, that opposing force. He might need that villain. Hopefully it's Colby Covington. Maybe it's GSP. Whatever the case, hopefully we see some sort of promotion and some sort of push for Tyron, because he really does deserve it. He really has earned it. He's done everything the right way. And regardless of whether the UFC does it, he's going to promote himself. So if you do like this guy after hearing this, it doesn't take much to find him. I mean, he's always posting stuff on social media. He's doing his champ camp anytime he fights. He has a podcast. You can find this guy. You can access him, learn more about him, and, maybe join the rest of us and
make the effort.
Yeah.
Because that was probably the best thing that... Just talking about it, my transition, you guys have heard it numerous times. I was not a fan. Fuck Woodley. I'm not buying pay-per-views.
We literally had a joke on this podcast where there was a bet that the loser would get a Woodley fight kit.
Yeah.
Because we didn't like Woodley that much that it was a point of embarrassment to wear a Woodley fight kit.
I will gladly take one.
That's the thing. These are the episodes I love doing, because I know we like to whatever. We dig up dirt, do whatever we do with PEDs, crazy conspiracy theories, this or that. But the best ones, the fun ones to do, are when someone has an amazing backstory and people are just missing the boat. And you're just like, look, man, this guy's fucking awesome. And look, we talk a lot of shit. Go listen to our Brendan Schaub episode. Who did we just did another one where I'm like, I don't like this guy. TJ Dillashaw. It was the last one. I'm like, I don't really like TJ Dillashaw. So this isn't for anybody that's new to the podcast. We shit on a lot of fighters. We're very honest about our opinions. And honestly, Tyron Woodley's a fucking gem. Like and I'm looking forward to the fight. And I was going into that, like I said, when we opened this podcast, thinking Till needed to win for the UFC. I'm not sure that's the case anymore.
All right, we'll stop it there. Two men fighting inside a steel cage isn't for everyone, but stories like Tyron Woodley's are. This is MMA Untold, and if you didn't know, now you know.
It's all good. And if you don't know, now you know, you know, you know.
I don't care so much about the fans, but when your job title is promoter, promote your fucking fighters. Promote your champion.